Loneliness. Loneliness doesn't always look the way we expect it to. Sometimes it's obvious, the quiet after a loss, the empty chair, the long stretch of days without real conversation. Other times it shows up in much subtler ways. You can be surrounded by people and still feel deeply alone. You can be busy, productive, even connected, and still carry a sense that no one really knows what's going on inside you. That's part of what makes loneliness so confusing. In a world where we're more connected than ever, many people quietly wonder why they still feel so disconnected. Loneliness is a universal human experience. It can arrive during transitions, grief, change, or uncertainty. It can show up after a move, a breakup, a divorce, retirement, or becoming a caregiver. It can surface when you're the strong one, the listener, the reliable person everyone leans on, but no one really checks in on. And when loneliness settles in, it doesn't just feel sad. It can feel heavy, disorienting, and exhausting. It can make everyday decisions harder. It can make you question yourself. It can quietly convince you that something is wrong with you, even when nothing is. For many people, the hardest part of loneliness isn't the absence of others, it's the absence of being understood. You may still talk to people regularly. You may show up to work, family gatherings, or social events. But the conversations stay on the surface. You sense that sharing what you're actually feeling would be inconvenient, unwelcome, or misunderstood. So you keep it in. Over time, that self-editing creates distance, not just from others, but from yourself. Loneliness often isn't about being alone, it's about being unseen. And that experience carries a real emotional cost. When loneliness goes unnamed, it tends to turn inward. People start wondering if they're too much, too sensitive, or too hard to connect with. They replay conversations, question their reactions, and second-guess their own needs. The longer it lasts, the easier it is to assume this is just how life feels now. But loneliness is not a personal failure, it's a signal. It's your system letting you know that something important, connection, reflection, presence, is missing. Not because you're doing life wrong, but because you're human. So many people try to outrun loneliness by staying busy. Others try to talk themselves out of it. Some push themselves to be more social, even when that feels draining rather than nourishing. None of these responses are wrong. They're just understandable attempts to cope. But they don't always address what loneliness is actually asking for. Often what's needed isn't more interaction. It's more attuned interaction. Loneliness softens when someone listens without interrupting, fixing, or reframing. It eases when you're able to say what's been sitting inside you, not polished, not minimized, and feeling met rather than managed. That kind of connection doesn't require a crowd. Sometimes it only takes one steady space where you don't have to perform. That's why loneliness can feel so intense during times of change or emotional strain. When life shifts, the old ways of being understood may no longer fit. You may not yet have words for what you're carrying, and without a place to explore it out loud, everything stays tangled. There's also a particular loneliness that comes from being the one who listens well. People who are emotionally aware, thoughtful, and supportive often find themselves holding space for others while quietly holding themselves together. They're used to being the calm one, the capable, the one who can handle it. But that role can become isolating when there's no reciprocal space for their own feelings. Loneliness doesn't always ask for solutions. Sometimes it asks for permission. Permission to pause, to be honest, and to hear yourself think. When you're able to speak freely without judgment or advice, something shifts. Thoughts slow down. Emotions become clearer. The loneliness that once felt overwhelming often reveals itself as unexpressed grief, fatigue, uncertainty, or longing. Naming those layers can bring relief, not because everything changes, but because you're no longer carrying it alone. It's important to say this clearly. Feeling lonely is perfectly acceptable. It means you're responding to your circumstances with awareness, and you have a human need. And awareness is a strength. Loneliness can also be an invitation to rebuild trust in yourself. When you've spent time feeling disconnected, it's easy to look outward for validation. But gentle reconnection often begins internally by honoring your own experience instead of dismissing it. You don't need to rush yourself out of loneliness. You don't need to explain it away, and you don't need to compare your life to anyone else's. What helps is creating moments of safety, places where your thoughts can land without being judged by you or anyone else or rushed. That safety might come from a trusted person, a quiet internal practice, or a confidential listening space designed for reflection rather than problem solving. At Hold, this understanding sits at the center of our work. We offer confidential, judgment-free listening for people who feel alone in what they're carrying. There's no pressure to know what to say, no expectation that you arrive with clarity. You don't have to perform wellness or explain your feelings in a right way. You simply get to talk and be heard. For many people, that experience alone brings calm, comfort, relief, and clarity, not because loneliness disappears overnight, but because it finally has somewhere to go, to be heard. Loneliness doesn't define you. It doesn't mean you've missed your chance at connection, and it doesn't mean you're asking for too much. It means you're human and paying attention. If loneliness has been sitting with you lately, it's okay. You don't have to navigate it quietly. When you're ready, a listening space is here.